time grief we go. Gotta learn to let it go. Once asleep, now awake, feeling every breath you take.
Welcome to Wake the F Up podcast, hosted by Alix and David Long, where we talk about living consciously and helping people uncover their essential selves so that they can stop sleepwalking through life. Our goal is to create a safe space where our guests can share how they've decided to wake the F up and become mindfulness experts through their own emotional healing journey. Welcome to Wake the F Up podcast. I am your host, Alix Long, along with my husband, Dr. David Long, and we are so excited today to offer our fourth installment in the series of talking about anxiety prevention, and all things anxiety related in the nervous system. So welcome back. If you guys have been tuning in, we are excited to continue down the path of anti-anxiety. If you haven't checked out our previous episodes, make sure you like, subscribe, and follow us on all of our socials. And you can look back at our past episodes. So we've done a lot of going through, why do we get anxiety? Where does it stem from? What is anxiety scientifically in the body? We had some great tips on the last podcast on, just in general physiology and the response of the nervous system and how to stop. How a panic attack will eventually stop itself. Actually, there's a limit to how long you can stay in that state, which can mentally help you kind of work yourself out of the fear, which can continue a path down anxiety towards getting another panic attack. So today we're actually going to talk a little bit more esoterically about anxiety. And this one is, we'll touch on science again, because, the app and everything we're doing is nervous system based. And I'm definitely the woo-woo side on the left side, and David's a little bit more traditional, logical physician mind on the right side.
Evidence-based, they call it.
He's evidence-based. And I'd like to say that I'm also evidence-based. I love research, and I like to make sure that there is fact behind what I'm saying most of the time. But I will say, as an intuit and a person who often goes with my gut, I often will trust my instincts first and do my fact searching second when I'm making decisions in my own life. I always know what I want, or generally know what I want, and then I do research behind it to support what I feel to be true. And so,
yeah, and I've actually thought about that with our experiential kind of take on this podcast. Mm-hmm. That and I know you probably have some anxiety about, credentials and stuff like that, but I actually think, and I used to say this all the time, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. You ever heard that expression? Of
course.
But I actually think, particularly in regards to feelings, emotions, that actually it doesn't do a whole lot of good let me rephrase. It's not necessarily what you read or how you read it, that you can come to a lot of this stuff with
research.
Experiential. So the reason I bring this up is someone literally right before we started was going into a deep existential dive or transcendental dive on just maybe anxiety is the root of a lot, or she was saying all, I would argue not all, but probably a lot of personal problems and diseases and psychopathology and stuff like that. And I think there's disease. I would argue that it's probably a part of all of those, and some of them it is all of them. You know what I'm saying? In other words, all of those pathologies or all those problems have some component of anxiety, and some disorders like panic disorder, it's all of it's the whole thing. It's the entire disease. So we were talking about if that's the case.
So let's back up a little bit. So before we get on the show, the person he's talking to is me. I've been writing this. So if you haven't been following along, bear with us. We're in the middle of updating a massive update in our website. And so throughout our social on the app, and actually soon, our website is going to be really amazing. I'm super excited about what's to come. So stay tuned there. Right now, we're kind of in an in-between state. But we'll be posting written articles by myself on a regular basis. And soon behind that, the goal is when the app is more towards completion, which we're getting there, we'll be doing little courses in a way that I'll push notification and kind of lead you through the topics that we're going through in the month. So it's just kind of a way to like fully immerse yourself in a topic that may be of interest of you. And then we'll, of course, archive everything. And if there's one you missed, you could always go back. But we started to talk about this blog that I'm writing. So often I'll write, you know, a how-to and I use from my experiential lens of like what I've walked through. But lately, I would say that 10 years of therapy, I have been studying deeply in EMDR therapy, and also simultaneously am deeply diving in personally, just on my own via reading, into attachment disorders and attachment theory. And so throughout all of these, it's so interesting that so many of the psychoanalytical people in the world and the experts in this lead to a couple of the same principles. It's similar to religion, how I feel about that. It's like all religions have certain fundamental beliefs that they're very similar ribbon.
Right.
We all fight about it, or people all, you know, there's a lot of fighting that goes on in terms of religion and the beliefs from one type of religious organization to another. It's the same in psychotherapy. I mean, nobody's fighting, but I think that there's some fundamental truths, but there's so much to discuss in terms of...
Yeah, that's actually reassuring that there are some...
there's a lot of fundamental
truths. If there weren't some fundamental psychiatric or psychological truths, we'd be really fucked, right? I think it's important that...
Well, it's interesting, though, but the study of the human mind and the brain and the nervous system and all of these things are still in theory, right? So even though we've got Jung and Freud and all these amazing experts, those were all just theories, right? It's very difficult to study human behavior from one person across the board and get that to be a evidence-based study, right? You understand that.
Almost impossible.
Almost impossible, right? It's like I always talk to Carl's cancer doctors about why they didn't have more information about nutrition and how that impacted cancer as a whole. And Jafar Ajani, one of the leading GI oncologists in the world, travels all over the world as an expert on GI cancers, works at MD Anderson, used to tell me that, you know, it was nearly impossible for them to study how nutrition impacts the body in general from person to person and get that in a study. And so sometimes when we're looking at things like that, it's very difficult to get concrete evidence to back you. So anyway, that's a little off track, but what I'm saying is I've been really like taking my knowledge over a long period of time along with my personal experiences and thinking about what is it that makes us so dysregulated, and what is it that makes anxiety such it's its own pandemic, right? It affects everyone. It's all this future thinking of worry about something that hasn't happened based on past experiences that did cause you a disconnect from the self. So what I would believe to be true, a disconnect from the self, would be a place or a time or a situation where something or someone made you feel unlovable, where you were at risk of losing connection with caregivers, loved ones, and would not be good enough to be loved, or I always say it's not enoughness. That's like a blanket term that I use to describe a feeling of disconnect with those we love and need to love us in order to feel whole, which, gentle reminder, we talk about nervous system all the time. We're humans, humans need connection and love in order to feel safe, right? We're meant to cohabitate. So
yeah, that's interesting that you bring that up, because that is normal, right?
Yeah, it's normal.
So it's normal to want to feel connected and to need that connection. In fact, there's a subgroup of psychopathology people that don't have that, and they're psychopaths, right? They're serial killers and extreme narcissists, and those people have the inability to make those connections, and they really cannot function well positively in society. Like, it's really required to be, as a human, to have some connection. And you're probably right that the lack of or limited ability to have those connections leads to anxiety, because
the fundamentals of this too, like in attachment theory, I've been studying actually specifically disorganized attachment, which is the more severe of there's many, many types. One of my children actually has an anxious attachment disorder, and has since they were little. I'm trying to keep my kids more anonymous for their own protection, but it happened because of my traveling to and from MD Anderson. In fact, when Carl was undergoing surgery, he had a gastrectomy and an esophagectomy, which is when you cut, part or partial or a lot of the stomach, and then you pull it up, and then you cut some or all of the esophagus, and you recreate essentially an entire GI tract. So his stomach had an 18-centimeter tumor, which was pretty big in the GE junction, which rests somewhere between where the esophagus and the stomach meet. We didn't learn until several years later that it was his primary tumor came up from the stomach into the esophagus, but that's hard to know. Long story short, when that happened, the surgery required, a 16 to 18-hour robotic surgery. A lot of people are opened up in that surgery, and they realize cancer is everywhere, and they will close them back up. But it's a really, really serious surgery, because if you go through with esophagectomy and gastrectomy, you're rerouting an entire GI tract, and you have to learn to breathe. There's a risk of lungs collapsing. You have to learn how to walk, eat, breathe. Everything changes because of where that surgery happens, right? Also, something I didn't really think about then and think about a lot now, the vagal nerve, which runs right through that area, for him was severed. So interestingly enough, dysregulation may have been a massive part of that healing as well. So many parts of fight, flight, and freeze come from that vagal nerve response, so your fight or flight responses. And I'm saying all this because it was such a massive surgery that we had to make some real plans for our children, who were 1 and 3 at the time. 1 and 2. So Kate had just turned 1 and Car was almost 3. We had made the decision that it would be best to send them to go be with my sister, because if he had lifted them up, if they had jumped in his lap, he wasn't able to walk. So after we were at the hospital for 2 weeks, post-operatively on the ICU floor for a week, and then the step-down unit after that, just getting him to stand up, breathe, and remove tubes, breathing tube, chest tube, feeding tube. He couldn't eat, breathe, really do anything on his own. So when we got home, we had OT, PT, nurses, around-the-clock care helping him function as a human. It was a 6-month recovery, which was quite rapid, and he was such a, really a fierce person to get through that in that amount of time. But my children, I had to make decisions on what to do with them, and it was really I would say, the most challenging decision I've ever made as a mother. And in that, I made the decision that they would go stay with my sister and her husband. They were going to Legoland and doing a family trip, and she was going to take them about a week and a half prior to, and a week and a half post the vacation. So all in all, it was almost a 30-day stay for them at my sister's house. It's very interesting to watch how this played out for my kids. My older child did remarkably well, had the time of his life, went to Legoland, lived his best life, came home, was with his boy cousins, literally thrived. But Kate I had to wean her from breastfeeding. She was really, really young. I had never left her before for vacation that I can think of, no more than maybe a 24-hour period or something like that, maybe a 2-day period at most. And so in terms of attachment, which is why I started talking about this, she had been diagnosed around 4 when I got her tested with an anxious attachment disorder. So they equated it to that, and then potentially me having to, at the end of the treatment of his life, we were in MD Anderson going to Houston, bi-weekly, weekly, there was chunks, and it was always these are the juggles sometimes you don't hear about in long-term caregiver situations with young children that are extremely severe and extreme anxiety. So I had extreme anxiety. I remember in the hospital, my sister would send me videos, and I could hear Kate crying, and viscerally my body was just not well. I broke out in hives from head to toe. So I had a lot of physical responses from that heightened anxiety, but it was interesting to see the imprint of the removal of a parent in a primal moment. So her, at a time where you cry and need your mom, but you don't have verbal acuity, not words to say, hey, I need you, I miss you, those kinds of things. How that impacted her overall. And it's hard for me to talk about. I have done a lot of therapy on this and had to forgive myself because I was trying to make the best decision for them with also minimizing the risks of them being exposed to too much PTSD, because a lot of drains and tubes on their dad was always very stressful for them, as well as physically not being able to be held, hugged, jump in his lap would be hard on him and them. So, and could actually hurt him and rip his suture line, which was a big risk of the surgery. But it's interesting to think about how attachment starts at such primal age, right? So under the age of 5, our caregivers, and before we're able to speak, and some of these attachments and how we believe that we are able to be loved, they imprint at such an early age. And I was a young mom, like you don't know the severity of what something, a decision like that, or having to leave, or even as a single mom, like having to go away from my kids more than the average bear to provide and stabilize my home. And so I think about this a lot in terms of anxiety for especially my daughter, who I would say I probably have swung the other way. And David would laugh. Like when he met us, he was like, she could probably pour her own milk. Like I was like, it devastated me when I got that diagnosis, because it was my fault. It was my decision. I did the best I could, but I impacted those. You will not walk a cancer path to a death of a young dad in a family without having some sort of decisions and a crossroad that someone will suffer, is what I'm saying. There's no possible way to get out of it unscathed. So I wanted to talk about that because I was thinking about anxiety, and in my home with my children, I would say that was the root of the beginning of anxiety. So the surgery happened in July. He was diagnosed in April. So you can imagine, I found out he had stage 4 in April 1, and July 1st, the 2nd, 3rd, something that first week of July, like the worst time to have surgery in a hospital because it's like all new residents, is when his surgery happened. And so from there on, it was a lot of anxiety, and my kids imprinted not only my anxiety, right? Even though I was trying, everything's okay. Like I was trying to do the thing where we make everything okay for everybody, keep everybody on an even keel. It's about this blog that I'm writing. So there's microcosms of how we do this in the world. We do it sometimes as a protector, as a parent, as a caregiver, as a spouse, as a lover, as a partner, as a friend, even as a coworker. You try to make everything okay for everyone around you at the risk of other people hurting, right? I did that for my children, and we do that as parents a lot. Unavoidably, they felt my anxiety, and it imprinted on them. And then the attachment issues happened because I had to leave and come back and leave and come back. So it was unpredictable. It felt unpredictable to them. Even though clearly I would have been there, could I have been there? So when we talk about early childhood, it's so interesting to think about, when did we first feel, I'm going to say abandoned, or when was your first memory as a child that you could be unloved or unlovable? Do you know yours?
No, I can't remember I'd have to think about it for a minute.
I remember my first childhood memory when I was a child. It was, and this is a simple one, and it makes sense. Like I've done this many times as a stressed out mom. I was being picked up from school, and my parent was so late, so late. Like school was calling, like forgot about you, so late. And by the time they got there, angry was the received emotion to get into the car. So you have your day. Maybe, I think I remember this particular day. This happened actually a lot. But this particular day was like a stressful day at school. Then like something bad happened at school, like a friend thing, maybe a test thing. I just remember I was having a hard day already. then the parent didn't come to get me for an hour and some change late. They had to call multiple times. It was like embarrassing to be in that scenario. And then you get in the car, there's a sense of relief in the nervous system. I didn't even know those words then, but in my body, I was like, oh, thank God, like, let's get the hell out of this situation. And then my parent was furious that they had to pick me up. Like, you're a burden. This was so annoying. Why do you always need rides? Like, and I remember at that time feeling like not wanted, like a burden. And it's interesting that one core memory, I have many, but that core memory still sticks with me today, that I don't like to be a burden. I mean, I literally shaped a lot of who I am. And I can think about post-trajectory of that memory. I remember when my brother, and I was just with my brother this past week, we were talking about this. Like, I was relieved when my brother would pick me up. I would be relieved to get a ride with another family. Like, I would find my own rides most of the time. My dad would disagree with that because I missed the bus a lot to ride with him in the morning. But after school, when I had like after school activities, I did my best to find my own way. So much to the point that when I was little, when I wanted to go to the mall, I rode the city bus. I mean, no way in hell would any parent let their kid do this. The city bus to the mall myself, and at a young age. So that message was loud and clear received that day, that like, don't be a burden. And anytime I had to ask for something moving forward in my life, I would get a bit of anxiety. And instead of saying, it makes me anxious to ask you for what I need because you get angry, like who's going to say that as a kid? Because you don't want to get in trouble. I changed who I was and found different survival skills to get what I needed. So I went in different routes to find what I needed. And so this blog that I'm writing is about that. What if all dysregulatory emotions, but especially anxiety, because I think fight or flight kind of vibes are the majority of what most of us feel is a sympathetic response, an up energy scary. I think our frozen states are that for a long period of time puts you down, or something extremely severe. So some of us get stuck in that because it's too long of a period of being in that state. And you, as you said last week, the body can't sustain that for so long. So you go down. But I'm wondering, like, if this is how it works. And I think about it with my children, like when I'm thinking about my parents, my kids are deep in therapy and they have been, as you know, surfacing so many hard memories that they're processing about their father's death, and how I'm the standing parent, that's here alive. So I get all of the anger. I get all of the, you weren't there for me. The people that died, and this is good or bad, it sometimes feels very bad for those of us who are here to receive it, that you did your best to care for them and the person that's dying. Or even if you had like a David style of death, like something quick, you did your best to, stop the rupture and get life back to repair, as we all would say in any sort of tragedy. And you still get blamed for a lot of the loss. And that's really hard, but you understand it because their parent isn't here, the other parent isn't here to be blamed for anything. And most of us who are widows with children, our children lose a parent in the middle of like vital times. It's not like you lose this parent and everything's perfect. You lose it in real life. And so there's going to be some unresolved emotions with that parent that's no longer alive. And instead, because the world will not allow you to be angry at your dead person, they really don't like you to say anything bad about your person that you've lost. And you feel like this terrible guilt when you do. Your children, and even yourself, will project that sort of disconnect, anger, natural part of grieving, any of these not so pretty emotions onto the parent that's there. And so it's interesting. Again, this is the same thing I'm writing in the blog. So what if our dysregulated emotions come from a disconnection between our true self, our inner self, and our external self? So and we've talked about this before in a podcast, that there's walls that you can put in between relationships when you hide yourself. Mm-hmm. But aren't we all hiding since we were little children?
Yeah, I don't think we spend a lot of time. I certainly did not asking myself what I wanted, who am I, what do I like.
Well, you're not allowed to as a kid, right?
Yeah, not really. I mean, I was trying to think of a moment where I felt abandoned as a kid. I can't think of one. I've always felt the opposite. I felt smothered. I felt like they were always...
Well, it doesn't have to be abandoned or smothered, right? Like the parents swing all the ways. There's a spectrum.
I never felt like they weren't there.
But unloved is what I want to say. Not abandoned. I'm sorry, I use the word abandoned, but maybe abandonment for me is unloved. And it's interesting, right? What is unloved for you?
Yeah, unloved for me as a kid was kind of being dismissed, because I was easy, because I was compliant. I was reasonable, as my dad says, which he just means I did what I was told. So I didn't get a whole lot of attention because I was okay.
Yeah, I think that happens a lot.
My brother resisted and got a lot of attention, negative. He also got a lot of positive attention because when he was okay, it was great.
Right.
So he got that kind of positive, and I just never got that. I always got you're great, you're doing good, but you could tell really what they meant was, thank God he's okay.
Thank God we can focus on the harder thing. Okay, so
I'm sure a lot of...
Do you remember feeling disconnected, like where you had to be okay or kind of unseen, I guess I would say, since that's
for sure, because I had the same desires as any kid. I wanted to be with my friends. I wanted to play. I didn't want to do schoolwork. I wanted to goof off. I wanted to, cut forests down, start bonfires. I wanted to do stuff that my parents would have not allowed. And I learned pretty quickly how to do those things without being caught or being found out.
So the person that you were around your parents, would you say that was the person you actually are?
No. And I think that's true for most kids. You're the person that your parents need you to be to survive, right? I mean, because you don't want to find out what happens if you're not. And I had a case in point of that. So I got to watch what happens when you're not the person that your parents need you to be, and it was not good.
So, okay, fast forward into independence. You're out of the house. You're, I guess for you, college, medical school.
Yeah, so by then...
How did that translate into life? Like, I'm not saying that this is your parents' fault, but did you learn...
By then you're well-trained not to ask what you like or what you want. So you just... And in my opinion, generally, if you don't, someone will. Like, someone will come along and tell you. You don't have to wait very long, right?
What to do?
Yeah.
Who to be.
Right.
And inside, that
can be someone you're dating or...
Were you always having anxiety about future? Like when you would... So, and this is what I'm trying to articulate from the article I'm writing, which is, it's hard to put in words. So there is an anxiety about presenting the self as though you think you need to be.
But you get, over years and years, you get really good at it.
Like used to the anxiety.
I used to think that, for example, you get so used to being whoever that people need you to be. I was 100% convinced forever that I was just an angry person.
Anger was the reactionary behavior, emotion from
people considered
anxiety.
Me angry, and they would make comments about, how angry I am, and I took pride in it. I was like, yeah, I am that angry dude.
Were you angry?
Yeah.
Why were you angry?
Because I wasn't able to express what I wanted or who I was.
Right. So this is what I'm saying. So there's friction.
My point is, over years and years, I became totally okay with that. In fact, I championed it. I thought it helps me work out harder. It helps me make more money at the office. And that anger, you can kind of, just like a lot of things, you learned, like anxiety. You can learn to turn anxiety into a very successful career.
Well, anger is anxiety.
Yeah.
Anger is anxiety.
Right.
But people don't realize that, but anger is, it's almost like I'm so worried that I'm going to double down and be louder because I've learned I have to be if I get loud, then people will go away or shut down. And it's just a coping strategy to keep people a little bit further away from you.
I don't know if you read that, what I sent you earlier about the, so this all kind of ties in together. Mm-hmm. One of the therapists that we work with has kind of a worksheet where it's similar to the fear chart, really, where it's basic questions that you ask yourself, not just when you're feeling dysregulated, but kind of all the time. Like, I mean, these are things that you should know, right?
Tell the listeners what the questions are. I actually didn't.
So one of the questions that just sprung to my mind is, whose voice do you hear in your head telling you that this is not what you want, or telling you that this is what you want? I thought that was really interesting because I can actually identify mine 99% of the time.
Do you hear someone else's voice in your head?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, you can. Well, you know where that voice came from.
So it's your voice, but it's a person in your life that was that voice.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Exactly. It's someone important to you that told you that you couldn't, or told you that you should, which is almost like,
or made you afraid that you would be unlovable.
Right. Right, and then that voice comes. I mean, I have heard Betsy's voice in my head for sure, telling me things about myself that she needed me to be. That but then I would hear it and I'd go, oh yeah, that's no. And then now I realize it was never me. Same thing with your parents. You hear your parents' voices in your head all the time. In fact, I read once like some terrible dad. His son was like, every single time I think that I can't do it, I hear your voice. You know, because his dad always told him, you can't do it, you're not good enough. You know, and his dad probably thought that was motivating. You know, that's kind of the old.
Well, then it's interesting. Okay, so if we're talking about a disconnect between who you really are, what you really need, and I'm not saying, like, let me be clear, who you really are as a child. You do need caregivers to set healthy boundaries for you. So you can't be boundaryless. It's just Parenting with Love and Logic, which is a great book if no one's read that.
Oh, I think that's a great. So like, where does that limit lie? An easy one is safety, right? So if your kid wants to do something that he thinks is his true self that is unsafe,
right?
Like, your job as a parent is to lay that boundary down, and now you may be that voice in his head that says, hey, if I touch that hot stove, I will burn myself because my dad told me that I will burn myself, right?
But maybe like
that's okay. I think that's okay.
The wanting to do things outside the scope of safety is normal for kids,
right?
And I think it's not always easy offering your kids a space to be able to say that.
So that's an easy, like, okay, that's something we should do. But there's a lot of stuff that we do, like grades. For example,
grades, yeah.
Pretty typical one, right? I need my kid to do well in school, and you can have all these justifications for it, and all they hear is, I'm not enough. I can't do this. I don't want to do this. I can't do this. And then you're telling them they have to do it. And it gets...
Well, and then you wrap their self-worth in the grade itself, and it's like we're teaching them they can't fail, they have to be perfect. You need to fit in the boxes to do the life plan that everyone else deems important for them. And I think we often can take our children down such an anxiety path in school. At school too. I mean, like God, our kids' school schools can sometimes really...
You put into your kid's head that they have to be good at sports, you know, and you...
let's give that example.
They like sports.
My kids' school, we had an incident where there was... friends who are working on boundaries, friends who are working on treating each other with respect or not respect, and learning how to say what they need in a friendship to not be talking bad about each other, being toxic, being unkind. And one of my kids was really going through a group setting where all these girls are, you know, arguing and fighting and being nasty to each other, and they got in trouble. Right. And she specifically got in trouble. Right. And then, you know, in some of the ways she was doing things that were not her best self, right? But in that we learned, okay, this is not, she got in trouble. You're not really supposed to group text someone something nasty because it's just not fair that everyone has to read that. And that's not that you wouldn't want to be in that situation.
So that's a perfect example. And so she learned that she needed a boundary, and then flash forward.
Well, she learned actually that anytime she stood up for herself too, she was going to get in trouble because other people, instead of dealing with the problem from person to person, would go to.
Right. So we basically told her, look, you need to decide what you want and how to, work this out. And then
well, it was an interesting situation because she did the right thing and she went to counselor and went to teachers and did all this thing.
She decided she didn't want anything to do with this.
Well, after a much effort to try to repair this rupture.
She got in trouble for that.
Then she got in trouble for that.
You can't not want to hang out with somebody. It was so confusing.
Well, so she set a boundary, and she did it in a text message, which is the way the kids communicate outside of school. And maybe not the best to do in a group setting, but she set a boundary, and there were some learning curves in that. Like, don't do it in a freaking group text. But I was furious because one of the moms of the receiving end of this called and felt like her daughter was being bullied. And I was like, and called it cyberbullying. Well, bullying is a serious thing, but it's also really misrepresented right now, just like a lot of terms, psychological terms, like everybody's calling everybody a narcissist. Everybody's saying everybody's bullying. It's like, that's not what this was. She actually was setting a boundary for herself and saying, hey, we're not healthy as friends, and I don't think after talking to the counselor and the teacher, we can't be friends anymore. But she's having all this anxiety about friends because every time she stands up for herself or says what she needs, she gets in trouble from superiors because some of the parents will go to the principal versus calling a mom and saying like, hey, let's talk this through. Let's let the girls work it out. Let's let them sit down and we'll be here to help.
This is a whole nother topic for another podcast and we're going to experience this with this baby.
Triangulating.
Which is trying to raise your children mindful in a non-mindful world, which is going to be a continual problem. My big Kate has the same issues.
Well, so anxiety, because we're talking about this. So this is like a little person problem, full of anxiety of being her true self. Right? She's young. She's learned this young that if she says what she needs. Right. She's in trouble.
She's in trouble, right.
And everyone's going to, and there's so many examples of inner self and outer self not being in alignment or being allowed to be in alignment because others will tell you, nope, if you don't fit in this box and if you're not who I need you to be, and it can be for lots of reasons, right? For school, I can see from their perspective that they might think that she's doing harm.
I disagree. I think I think some really good teachers are understanding of this and can deal with it. Like I remember our guest that unfortunately weren't able to publish her because of the sound quality was so poor.
Yeah, we had an amazing.
She told a story about she's a teacher and she told a story that she got an angry phone call from a parent because the parent wanted.
Alethea Cummins is her name. She's amazing.
Accused her of. She said, "Did you tell my son it was okay to be angry?" And she was like, she was furious and she was like, "Yeah, it is actually okay to be angry. It's an emotion that he's going to feel, and it's all right." And my point is that there are teachers out there and people out there that can get it, but it's rare.
It is rare.
The truth.
And actually, she got in trouble with school.
A lot of teachers. Yeah, she did. A lot of teachers are in survival mode. They're trying to get through the day, and I'm sure
teachers are doing their best. I mean, actually, my daughter's teacher's been an amazing resource and has been trying to stay, understanding and neutral in all the parties, and that's a hard situation to be in.
All of these things can lead to anxiety, and maybe a huge leader to anxiety is not really being authentic. And
well, just something to think about in caregiving, in relationships, in your workplace. We talk about this a lot, especially I do wellness work. So, like creating safe spaces. That's a very I'd like to say yoga term, but it should be like a really basic fundamental in all environments and communities that you encompass or house or are a part of. Because I think it's interesting to think about safety, in my opinion, might be just the ability for people to be themselves. There's, of course, safety, physical safety, keeping a roof over your head, keeping the people in your environment fed and taken care of in that way from harm. But when you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right, we need connection. We need to be able to connect. And how can we connect? Like, if you go back to nervous system work, the polyvagal theory is very extremely clear on this. And Deb Dana does a deep dive on this, which is you cannot connect physiologically in our body unless we feel safe. And so it's interesting, we've talked about this many, many times. are we allowing safety in our homes, in our work environments, in our friendships, in our partnerships, as parents, as friends, or are we not? And like, is all dysregulated emotions, which I think is predominantly anxiety, is the beginning emotion that we feel, is we feel dysregulated. If most of us who feel dysregulated, slight dysregulation, the first emotion you feel is sort of that heart flutter, anxious thought that can turn to anger. Anger is just a protective measure to fight against, and you feel a little bit like, I got to protect myself. That's a secondary learned response, but same energy. And so I'm just wondering, this is not so factual, but it feels like all emotions that are dysregulatory come from a disconnect of allowing us to be safe to be ourselves. And I'm wondering if we rethink safety in life and how we present that. Are you safe to feel like you can be your true self in front of your kids? And can your kids be their true selves in front of you? Like, let's start at the base level, right? Because when my daughter was little, she didn't have words to say, I don't feel safe when you're gone so much. Therefore, imprinted an attachment disorder.
Yeah.
Right? And we'll be working out of that anxious attachment disorder maybe the rest of her life. I think hard loving and me being around her and really putting in a ton of therapy for her since she was 3 years old on you see very little of it.
I can tell you one I struggle with is allowing kids to say no.
You can't allow your kids to say no?
It's a struggle. I mean, I've learned in the last 4 or 5 years to, I'm much better at it now. But before, oh, hell no.
Why can our kids not say no to you? This provides you with anxiety?
If they say no, yeah.
What makes you anxious about it? That they don't respect you and see you as an authoritative?
That they won't be safe. That they won't learn the basic things that I think they need to learn. That I have to worry about them now because they said no. Because I've already picked what I need them to do or want them to do. And if they say no, then that kind of throws a wrench in, oh, well, I thought this was what we're going to do to be safe, or this is what we're going to do to be whatever. And no can be very hard as a parent. Now...
But where did you learn this?
I feel different.
Where did you learn this?
100% my parents. It was a way to control the anxiety, right? Compliance is a way to control anxiety.
Control in general can be more than just control on all levels. Is a false way of controlling anxiety.
Right.
You think if you control, but what we just already heard from him is when we feel we're controlling someone and they're giving us what we want to keep them safe, or they're okay, right?
Yeah.
Then what happens? You're hiding hard. I mean, you're hiding all of yourself. This is my biggest fear as a mom. Since I've become more woke, whatever you want to call it, awake, my biggest fear is that my fear of their not being okay will be larger than my ability to hold their not okay and miss them being who they are. Right. So I don't want my kids to fake it out and be what I need them to be, because they know when they give that to me, I'll shut up, calm down, leave them alone, let it go. Yeah, and then I don't know them. Like, I can't tell you how many of my kids' friends who aren't in our house and they feel more safe to say this are like, oh, I would never tell my parents that. I could never tell my parents that. I would never my mom would never know who I really am. I'm like, that is a frightening feeling to think we might go through the whole world not knowing our kids.
Have I told the story about Carr saying no to summer camp?
You have told that story, but briefly repeat.
So it was like this time of year, a couple of years ago, and we're like, all right, you guys want to go to summer camp? And they all said, no, we don't want to go to summer camp. And I just made this kind of like sarcastic comment. I was like, well, that's, no problem. There's lots of stuff to do around the house. We just bought this home, and there's yard work and painting, and there's all kinds of stuff we can do this summer. And Carl looked at me, he's like, yeah, I'm not doing that. And I was like, what do you...
I could feel your anger when
immediately
when
it totally triggered me, and I was like, so you don't want to go to summer camp, you don't want to help around the house. I was like, what is it that you want to do this summer? And he said, honestly, David, he says, all I want to do is play with my friends and play video games.
I love this example. So he has told this before, but Let's take my theory that all anxiety stems from a disconnect from the inner self and the outer self. What the outer world needs you to be versus who you are on the inside, okay? Let's take David's example of my son telling him as a grown man, nope, I don't want to do what you're telling me to do, which in David's mind, summer camp teaches them independence, autonomy. It is a good thing. Our kids loved it when they went, by the way. Right. And they're disconnected from technology.
The punchline of the story is he went to summer camp, and then when he came home, he helped me with all those jobs. So he did all the stuff that, I really
But the problem was hearing what his truth.
Big time. And that
doesn't mean that you parent from, we don't ever want to do anything we want you to do. Right. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to do it. It's more just being able to hear their truth.
Luckily, in the moment, I had this, my initial instinct was anger, and I thought it was disrespectful.
Okay, but let's go through this, right? Your initial response was anger. Yeah. He wasn't listening to you. Yeah. You were losing control.
And, more importantly, he wasn't telling me what I wanted to hear.
Exactly.
It was very disappointing.
And where would you say, if you looked at your own childhood memories, who was a person or a memory that would pop up for you that felt very same as that?
What?
He never does. He can never remember memories. If I ask him memories, which is, I want you to know, if you're a person with a lot of blank spots in your childhood all the way through your life, you are dissociating. You're dissociating. Take some time, journal, really try to pull some things. EMDR therapy is a wonderful tool. Okay, you said he made you angry, right? He wasn't listening to you.
Yeah.
You felt like you were losing control.
I'm not losing control, but that he didn't respect
He didn't see you or respect you.
For him, right.
Where is there a childhood moment? Have you felt this before in your childhood?
That's my whole childhood, sweetie.
Okay, so he gets mad at me when I go to your... It's fine.
He was never asked what I wanted to do. I just did what I was told to do.
But do you see how this works, right? So David is in deep therapy, as am I. Therapy does not make you perfect. It makes you see... So cognitive behavioral therapy...
Actually, therapy did fix this situation.
It helped a lot.
It did. So I had
He went to his therapist and talked about it, right?
No. I was about to get really angry and react and maybe come across the table at him. And I just had this thought that crossed my mind. I was like, what if someone would have asked me at the dinner table? It was dinner table. What if someone would have asked me when I was 10 or 11, however it was, probably 11, what I really wanted to do this summer? And what if I was at that dinner table and I felt safe enough to tell the people that asked me what I really wanted? And when I was 11, I would have said the exact same thing.
Okay, so hold.
Every 11-year-old wants to play video games.
Your ability to hear and provide safety for him came from experiential learning that when you took a step back, you realized that you yourself at 11, 10, 12, whatever, however,
In fact, that's a recurring thing with Cara and I. He'll say something or do something, and then I will immediately, even his anxiety, when he has anxiety, I'm like, oh shit, I felt the same way when I was his age. Exactly the same. Very, very similar. Everything had to be perfect. I just I couldn't say.
Let me tell and relieve the parents at home. It is far easier to take this step back with a stepchild that you did not birth and raise from the ground up. For whatever reason, you lose this guilt cycle, feedback loop that you are the reason they're having all these problems.
Right.
But I just want us to go through that cycle. So in a parenting moment, this is how interactions go all day long. You got a little bit activated or anxious, let's say, because, and it came out as anger.
I feel good about it because I stopped the cycle. I didn't make him do something he didn't want to do. I didn't yell at him. I didn't even show disappointment. I don't think he.
You also authentically felt your own feelings in this. So
I did.
You felt your feelings that were given to you. Okay, right? So remember, the feelings that were handed to us as survival skills are so deeply ingrained in our amygdala, in our back brain, to keep us safe. So we still autopilot from those voices in our head of our childhood. And it's that visceral response where you're immediately angry. And I often stop myself in parenting when I am so angry. I'm like, why is this making me so? I ask myself, why am I so dysregulated? Why am I so mad? Why can't I calm down and hear what they're saying?
That's exactly what I
Doesn't mean they're not going to have to do what I'm saying.
think, like, why is what he's saying making me angry? And it was 100% me. It had nothing to do with him at all, really. He was saying
he wanted to be a kid for the summer and be free from all the pressures and not have to do anything but play with his friends.
He literally was just telling me he wanted to be a kid, literally. And that made me angry, which is crazy.
It's not that crazy because
it's upsetting.
If you think about your childhood, were you able to be a kid?
Not that they knew about. I mean, we were kids, but
right. So hiding.
Right. We hid a lot. Yeah.
A lot of hiding.
Yeah.
Same. I mean, I was actually free to be a kid, but hiding was a different way. I actually people pleased and changed who I was to make everybody okay around me. So that's a different energy where you go so far looking at what others need from you. You don't look inside of yourself. And we did a whole month, if you want to go back and on being authenticity, people-pleasing. That was all of last month, and you can hear my whole shebang in that.
Yeah.
But it's the same idea. So my inner self felt not good enough unless I was doing that. And your inner self always felt unlovable if you weren't complying. And that would be, you would comply, but behind the scenes, you might still go hide and do what you wanted to do.
Oh, yeah.
All kids do this, by the way.
Right.
But ask yourself at home, like, where in your life are you hiding your inner self from your outer world? If you're a parent, how hard are you making it for your children to be their authentic self?
I mean, not just children. It can get out of control. You can be in the wrong job. You can be in the wrong...
Everything. I mean, yes, this goes everywhere. Are you safe at work? Are you safe in relationships? Are you safe at home? Safety is a word that people don't identify. When you look at it from a polyvagal lens, and we're looking at it from that kind of scientific way, safety is the place, safe enough, as they often say, safe enough, is where you feel like you can say what you need, you can be who you are inside your body, you're not getting all activated up, you're not like feeling anxiety, feeling anger. All those emotions are dysregulatory emotions. And we're talking about anxiety because I think 90%, if not more, of the anxiety that happens that's not good, that dysregulates us in a not healthy way, to not forward project us. So remember, we talked last time, good anxiety would be like butterflies in your stomach on a stage where you're like, have to do this performance and put on this thing for work. That's a good thing for your career. It's a good thing for your life. You want to do it. You signed up to do it. It's nerve-wracking, and when you deliver it, you feel great.
Yeah, there's a ton like that.
Performance anxiety.
And like
that's not this, though.
For example, going through med school, I wish I would have had some of these skills that I have now, not because I wouldn't have been anxious, but I would have been able to better, in a more positive way, deal with my test anxiety and my performance anxiety at residency and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. There's better ways to deal with it. That does not mean that when you go to work, you don't feel, anxious.
Again, regulation does not mean you don't have feelings. You feel all the feelings. You just can get yourself back to the baseline. Right. And your baseline is a tolerable level of feeling things where you're not so dysregulated that you're doing reactionary behaviors that make you outside of your character, outside of your window of tolerance.
Now, that's not to say that there aren't situations that are intolerable, like there's nothing you can do, right? They're so out of your control that you have to remove yourself from that situation to get any sort of sense of relief. But
how would you say that being your inner self, and I think this is like our ending point. So, of course, this is such an esoteric thing. I think there's a lot of philosophers. I think Freud, there's a lot of people, psychologically speaking, philosophically speaking, that would support this. If you look at, especially like Buddhism, some of my favorite thinkers are talking about this enlightenment or higher consciousness. Many of us, like me, who are like, I want to be a higher consciousness. I want to be enlightened. Like, maybe I just want to be at peace. That's been my last 10 years of just trying to figure out how can I get myself in a peaceful state. What I was looking for was safety and maybe higher consciousness. And I said this in my blog, was like, what if the whole purpose of being in this planet is to get ourself in more alignment towards our inner and outer self? And when we do that, the ripple effect of how your life around you changes it's so powerful that you feel almost in higher consciousness. Now, I feel often in a higher consciousness than some people around me because I know how to make choices towards safety, and I don't give a shit what you think about me. I mean, I do give a shit what you think about me, but I don't let it stop me, and it feels like I'm thinking on a different plane, not level, plane, than most people around me. And I'm wondering, how has...
I would say it comes and goes.
Yeah, well, I'm not doing it all the time. It's fucking hard. This is a practice.
It comes and goes. I mean, I have true moments of clarity in anxious situations, which is a great feeling, and then I have very high anxiety.
Well, if anything's going to knock you back into your survival skills, it's going to be your loved ones, your children, or big stressors at work, financial stress, that kind of stuff. So those core, they say this in health coaching. It's like money, intimacy, relationships. Those are the kind of core parts of ourself that can knock us back into our survival patterns, because in all of those spaces, if we're not okay, we feel that unlovable, and then again go back into our survival skills of hiding and protecting.
I don't expect not to feel it. I mean, that's not a goal of mine anymore.
I'm wondering though, like when you decided to start living from your inner truth, your inner self, how did things shift for you? Because I feel like you're a dramatic, and people often ask David, I think mine has been a slower progression, and so it's not as obvious. Like,
I just think you're way better at it than I am.
No.
You seem like you've always
no
been,
way.
You seem like you've always been this way.
Definitely not. I'm super dysregulated. You can ask anyone who used to work for me.
Seems like you've always been to me.
How many business partners have I gone through? Like, no, lots of problems. Still have lots of problems, but mine is not enoughness. I'm now in a full circle of safety. I only am in partnerships and relationships, for the most part, in safety. I've cut my circle way down.
I would answer the question, everything changes. Everything's changed.
So what has changed for you when you started to...
My career is totally different.
Your career is totally different.
I work for myself. I built a team of thoughtful people that I work with.
That also care about safety.
Yeah, I have met and fallen in love with someone that lets me be myself.
Most of the time.
I have a way better relationship with, I'll say, all of my kids now. I mean, I have a better relationship with all of my children than I've ever had. I have just on a day-to-day basis, and in fact, it's hard to even say that I have more gratitude now, because I didn't have any gratitude before at all. But I feel often full, like overflowing with gratitude, which is a really wonderful place to be. And I was never there before. I was always anxious, angry, what's the next thing?
But I think that death does this. Like, death is it doesn't always, you can go back to your sleepy patterns for sure, but I do think the shattering after a big loss creates this vulnerability.
I don't think it necessarily has to. It's just I came from a really closed off place. So I think for me it was a smashing or shattering, if you will.
Well, I guess for me it felt like death did that, because I think, one of my children being suicidal and getting kicked out of a school, everything was just so out there for everyone to see. It was like my inner insecurities, the parts that I would have hidden, and they were just all out there for the whole world to see, and I couldn't make it better or keep it better anymore. And then my work life, I couldn't keep the people-pleasing, the balance, and the holding it all together for everyone, even if they didn't ask for it.
But in specific, in regards to anxiety, I am aware now of my body when I start to get anxious. I have a toolbox full of skills and people that can help me with my anxiety. And I avoid people, situations that I know make me anxious. I just don't have time for them anymore.
Boundaries.
Boundaries. So that, from an anxiety point of view, just to keep it on topic, that has changed dramatically. And actually, just to admit that I have anxiety.
Anxiety is a broad category, though, so that's why we've taken so long to talk about it.
I've never even admitted that I had anxiety before.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah, no, I mean, I was...
you have a lot of anxiety.
I know, but I...
So do I.
No, it wasn't even a concept, honestly. Never even entered my brain.
And you know what's crazy is I have so much anxiety, but no one would call me anxious. because I can easily put myself in front of a crowd. Like I oddly, extrovertedly.
I would definitely call you anxious.
I'm so anxious, like highly anxious. But because I thrive in leadership roles and
your anxiety,
and speaking in public.
Limited, focused, but intense. No, it's extremely intense, but it's laser beam focused. It's not general. It's not broad. You don't have anxiety about like everything, but you have very specific things that make you anxious.
Indeed.
And
our children are a lot like my children.
Yeah, your children. My children, like we said with the step.
I know. Your children, I feel they're doing amazing.
I know.
Like, I'm like, they're amazing. They're doing amazing.
That's the way I feel about your kids, too.
Yeah, my children. And, it's because I lost a lot of control. I also fell into the trap so easily of doing what everyone else expected of them, making sure they were doing what was expected of them in society and fitting into the norms.
Well, I think that's what you do when you don't ask the question.
My God, it was bad. And actually,
I did the same thing.
I shoved my kids in
a box.
into boxes that they were supposed to be in. And now I'm like, there's a freedom and scary, like lonely in the fact that I'm like, we're having another baby. We're 40 and 50.
She's 50, I'm 40.
Clearly not 50.
Clearly not.
We've done all these things that people are like, oh, you're doing that. Like he went to see a physician the other week, like as a referral pattern thing, and then she's like, oh, well,
she just
assumed we made
an accident. And I told her it was fully planned, and
that was even weirder for her. She was like, oh,
surprised. Yeah, she's like, oh, this is.
Oh, that's even more different.
But I could see in her eyes that it piqued her curiosity. She was curious about that kind of freedom and that kind of lack of anxiety.
Yeah,
because she was very anxious, like a lot of people in medicine, and in medicine and a lot of jobs, you learn to kind of like grab the anxiety and let it take your career off,
Yep.
And I think a lot of people are scared to let it go.
But and that was how we got to the decision, yes, for baby girl in utero, is we came to this constant reaffirming, because we went through this so many times. I had to release some of my past worries, fear that something bad could happen again, because you don't have control. But I had to really look deep inside of myself and say, what does my inner self want?
Yeah.
F what the world out here thinks.
Yeah.
And because there's going to be a lot of that, like, oh, you're old.
Yeah, so, actually, one of the ways that I do that is I don't ask.
Other people what they think?
Because I used to always kind of like load the boat, as we say.
Men just get away with
as
that.
We say
women cannot.
In medicine, you got to load the boat. Well, what do you think? What do you think? And then once you have enough people on your side, you go, yeah, I'll do it.
I don't ask either.
When I decided to ask you to marry me, I didn't ask anybody. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't ask anybody. I didn't call my family and say, hey, what do you think? You've met Alix. What do you think about her? I didn't involve them at all. It was the best thing I ever did.
Yeah.
I mean, two of the best things I ever did. Number one, asking you to marry me. Number two, not asking anybody what they... And I didn't, at that point, I was so free of that that feeling that I needed to involve people. I really was for the first time in my life, deciding what I wanted and doing it.
Yeah.
And this baby...
Well, when you do that, you actually get a lot of positive feedback. Like, you feel good.
This baby is very, very similar. I didn't ask anybody what they thought. This was something that she and I made as a just us decision.
We did talk. Well, I wouldn't say we talked to the kids about it, but we definitely prepared them, discussing that we were thinking about it. But at the end of the day, even our children,
I like to drop things on them when they're captive.
Constantly be like, we're having a baby. Just kidding, but what would you think if we were? I'm like,
the only time you really have your kids captive is like out to dinner. So we'd be at some restaurant, and I'd drop a bomb. Not a full bomb, a little pre-bomb, and there's nothing they can do because they got a steak in front of them or something. They don't.
So uncomfortable. They're all like eyes wide big. Yeah, you can see especially the teenagers who understand the concept of how we have a baby.
Yeah, they want to crawl out of their skin, but.
I mean, I think though, even with them, right? It's a decision that we had to go from our inner self, and we had to align with each other's inner self, which was different. Like we came from different ways of why we wanted another shot at family and creating our own family. And our own family, what I mean by that is, we have blended these 5 children obviously 3 of them were raised by him and Betsy and are now being raised by me and him, and same with my children and David and I. And this baby would be almost like pulling it all together.
So this is related loosely. In my prior marriage, I would say that we suffered significantly, and I knew it at the time, but I went along with it. We suffered significantly from what I call professionalism. Like, we could not make a move without some maybe multiple professionals telling us what to do. And
give an example.
I was just thinking when we bought my practice, when we opened my practice, like, we really didn't discuss it I didn't call the finance guys. You and I crunched the numbers and we looked at it, and
I mean, you talked to your finance.
And emotionally it felt good and it was the right thing to do, and we did it. I mean, the truth is, I could have got on the phone and talked to all kinds of people that have done this.
Let me put some advice for you out there.
I didn't.
Mentorship is incredibly important, in my opinion.
It is.
But I think you've got to know yourself first. And if you don't know who you are, and you don't even know when we're talking about operating from that inner voice, and you've blocked that out so hard at this point, you're not even sure what that inner voice is saying. No mentor in the world is going to help you with any decision. Right. You can go out and get that. They're just doing what parents would do as a small child, telling you what to do.
I think that's one of the myths of therapy, is they are not going to tell you what you need.
But I think David struggled to listen to that inner voice.
Oh, for sure.
And therefore going to mentorship might be, for psychologically, a risk for him. Right. I have a lot of mentorship. I go to a lot of people for mentorship.
I'll give you an example.
But they have to be trusted.
When I bought my second home, I had already bought a home, right? So I was familiar with home ownership. When I was looking at our second home, I asked my dad to look at it with me. I was in my 40s. I have no idea why I did that, retrospectively. What could he wasn't giving me the money. What could he have possibly added to, and I already loved the home. But for some reason, I needed his approval or disapproval to buy or not buy the house.
Well, just so we know out there, trusting yourself comes with a lot of practice. You have to actually first be mindful enough to listen to what do you want. You have to separate your inner voice from the external world. So I think what David is trying to say, in lots of ways, which are amazing examples for everyone out there.
Think about your first husband and the diamond ring, same thing. No, I mean, like, why did he need input from his mom about the diamond ring?
I think a lot of people take their mom to buy a diamond ring.
But that's totally inappropriate and weird.
I mean,
just as weird as me thinking my dad to buy my second home. So weird.
I never thought it was weird until he brought it up, and I was like, maybe that is weird, but I also think sometimes people are just excited about a familial, something exciting.
No, it's anxiety.
Well, I think it might be just the Italian family. They just love their little closeness.
It's anxiety.
It's anxiety for sure. I mean, Carl was extremely anxious. You would never know it, but he was extremely anxious. But I think that you have to give yourself quiet and space is what David is trying to say. And I'm thinking step one for you out there, if you're trying to reduce anxiety, what if a lot of your anxiety is coming not from positive anxiety, from performance, things that are good, that move us in forward trajectory, but it's coming from a disconnect from what you really want on the inside versus what you think the world needs you to be. And if you know you have that disconnect, that you're putting on airs or you're shape-shifting who you are in lots of places in your life, take a moment to quiet the external noise. I mean, it's why people find such power in nature and solitude and meditation. It's because sitting with ourselves is something we don't do at all anymore. And like, start your day with a little bit of silence, journaling, whatever quiet endeavor gets you to tap into your inner self. Because I think just starting with that practice to hear what you might be not necessarily hearing in your head, but what your inner voice is wanting, or what do I want, is a really big question. We say this a lot. That's how a beginning awareness, and asking yourself these questions of what you want is how you wake up. And
it seems so simple, but it's so hard.
It's really hard.
It's the hardest part.
And if you were taught to not trust your inner voice as a child, which many of us were, you're going to have to, it's going to feel extremely scary to do that. And so you're going to have to practice. It's going to be a practice and it's going to be work. But I suggest starting with small things like saying, I don't feel like going to that party tonight. Thank you so much, to your wife. Like,
or just, what do you want to eat?
Oh my God, dinner.
Like,
why is dinner such a fight?
Why am I eating this? do I really like this?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Dinner is a huge one. People fight over dinner all the time. But I think that it's an interesting thought, and I know this was we're way away from fact potentially here, because this is a theory of mine that I just am wondering if the inner and the outer self being so disconnected creates a lot of our emotional problems. And what if we just this year try to get ourselves in a little bit more of alignment of what we want on the inside with what we want, what we're doing on the outside, and we stop allowing other people to tell us who we are.
And I think it's important to mention, because we haven't mentioned it yet, that one of the ways to, in my opinion, the most consistent, effective way to find out what you want is to listen to your body. Your body will tell you exactly what you want and what you don't want.
It's true.
It tells you without you even asking it. You just have to listen to it.
It's true.
And when you feel a certain way, that pit in your stomach, that may not be something you really want, or that pressure behind your eyes when you get anxious, you should be thinking, why do I really want to be doing this? It's causing me anxiety. And you have to listen to your body to know.
We are gonna actually put a couple of resources on the show notes today. So there's a thing called the felt sense experience. It's a really, really amazing tool that's used in the polyvagal theory. Somatic experiencers use this in almost every session. And it's not thinking what's in your head.
Right.
It's feeling what's in your body, what sensations are happening, and then what emotions are.
I was just about to say that if you're not feeling your body, then it's literally just words.
Then it might be your parental or caregiving voice back in the way saying, like, you should do this, David, you know. Right. And so just be cautious, like when we're thinking in our head.
That's a perfect example. So like if your inner parental voice is telling you something, but it feels good,
right?
You know, then kudos. That's okay. That's always tell me.
Make 2 columns in your journal. One, what is the body? If the body feels good, head feels bad.
Right.
Start to look at those inner voices and put them in a right column. Bodily sensations on a left column, and they will. When your inner and outer self are in alignment,
it's all good.
Everything is the same. It's the same. It's the same. There's no friction. There's no distance. There might be disappointment out there, but you feel okay about it. You can hold that disappointment without it knocking you into a different way. Well, this has been Anxiety Month. We are rolling into.
I'm so glad we finished that way. I'm so proud of myself.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, I had that thought in my body,
what?
And I wanted to share it. That we needed to mention that in order to get to that point, you have to feel your body.
What's funny is that I'm the somatic expert in the room, and he is.
It makes sense to me.
Because he actually baseline is in his head a lot more. He's a cerebral thinker. Sure. He will, I am too. Like actually every therapist we've ever seen will be like, okay guys, like you're not going to find this in a book. Let's not try to research and intellectualize this.
Our last therapist said, she said, I can tell y'all are information or...
information people.
Yeah, y'all are information people. You're not.
You're intellectualizing and information.
You're not
people.
just gonna do it. You need the information. It's like
so. We were like, that's true, right? So you want to be careful to not everything comes and you can do all the research. I stay informed, stay freaking informed. But if your body is disconnected from what you're doing and you feel a pull to get away from it, those visceral responses are really important. So. Yeah. Wake Wellness app is literally about this. We're trying to get you to identify when you're in fight, flight, or freeze, to help you down-regulate, to get a little bit out of that, and to help you pay attention to your felt sense experience and get you to regulate a little bit more. Because when you're regulated and you're in your window of tolerance, remember, right? You're safer. You're safe enough, as they say, and you're able to connect on a deeper level with your loved ones. I think true love, true connection, and true being awake, these things that make us feel good on the inside, can't come when we're blocking with all of this anxiety. And so Anxiety Month has been a big, 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 big one. We could go on forever, but if you're so anxious that you're not safe enough to connect in your world, you are blocking yourself from all the peace and love and freedom to live your best wake life. And I think David and I are exemplary models of this, because we've actually had a shit ton of loss. It has not been easy. This is not an easy walk, but the other side of choosing your inner self and putting it out there for the world to say, love me or not, is that authentically the only people that we have in our world now that will stick around, we've lost a lot of people, are those who love us as we are.
So what do we have to look forward to next month?
Next month's going to be big. We're rolling into May, so...
I'm checking out, I guess.
Mother Month. No, you're coming in. So to all the mothers out there who want to learn about the mother wound, we'll be talking about mothers, mother wound, mothering.
Mother.
The mother of all months, May. So May will be Mother Month.
Hard month for our mothers to listen.
I would like to apologize to our mothers. We love you. You are amazing. We know that you did an amazing job. We're sitting here talking about our feelings. We're in love. Our children are thriving. We have had hard things. We know that you did the best that you could. We love our mothers. We love our mothers so much. Our mothers are amazing. Actually, our mothers are going to be together this week.
We're going to do a month of men.
Don't worry, fathers, you're coming next. So you're coming into June. June will be the month of men. Fathers, the paternal wound. We'll go through a bunch of what happens, in the mother and father wound in the next month. And then actually we're going to do a really cool all-men panel on feeling.
Yeah, we're going to touch on anxiety specific to men or
feelings specific to men, and we're actually going to try to get as much diversity as we can. We know that we're short on that with two, white people sitting here with the same kind of upbringing. So we're going to try to get a variety of different backgrounds from different men and hold a panel of how it feels to be, any variety of man. So I'm excited about that.
Me too. And don't forget to like and subscribe.
We forget every week.
And like it.
Either way, they're just...
No, you're supposed to do one and the other.
Like, subscribe, follow us on our pages, and download our app. It's ever-changing, and we've got some new amazing sounds coming up. So we're doing binaural beats, some healing sounds, EMDR-style bilateral stimulation, and there's a lot of good research out there that even when you take that bilateral stimulation outside of therapy, so away from a therapist, and you just listen left, right, crossing the midline in the brain, quite healing. It calms down the hypothalamus. Am I saying that right? Yeah. You'll have to edit that piece. I'm literally having a brain fart. It calms down the back brain, and it actually helps you to process feelings, reduces ADHD symptomology, brings down anxiety just by crossing the midline in the brain, left, right. You can look that way. You can hear that way. It's pretty awesome. So
lots more stuff to talk about.
Yes, lots more to talk about.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, have a great day. Try to bring down your anxiety. Approach the world in an authentic way.
This has been Wake the F Up podcast, hosted by Alix and David Long. Be sure to check out other episodes where our community of experts share tools and ideas to help you wake to the life inside of you. If you enjoyed this episode of Wake the F Up, please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Join the Wake community by downloading our app. Just search for The Wake Wellness in the Apple or Android App Store. And follow us on Instagram at The Wake Wellness. Thanks for listening.